Alright, Sly. I see you got yourself a friend here. Dead Space. Long dead, just like you. And also just like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So tired of these game franchises being dead. I need to bring them back to life. Except you. I'm not bringing you back. I need to become a scientist. That's exactly what I'm gonna go do.
Survival horror is back on the rise, baby. Resident Evil is doing better than ever with its latest sequels and remakes. Demands of a new Silent Hill game, they increase each and every week. The evil within is dead and gone. And hey, Dino Crisis fans, they're hydrating the very earth beneath them with their tears. One day, Dino Crisis fans. One day. All right, so okay, maybe it isn't on the rise, but there's renewed interest for sure. I adore this genre because of how meticulously designed the games within them are. Every room you explore must be thoroughly combed for items. Every piece of equipment and bullet you hold demands precise moment-to-moment decision-making, even with the simplest encounters. That's at the core of every survival horror title worth your time. So it then falls on the developers to provide the seasoning which separates their game from the bunch. To me, the best seasoning of them all is that of Dead Space. Originally known as Rancid Moon, Dead Space was described as Resident Evil in space by executive producer Glenn Schofield. Deeply inspired by Resident Evil 4, Glenn's goal was to make the most frightening horror game imaginable, and this was created upon 4 pillars: immersion, procedural elements, strategic dismemberment, and sound. These principles would define each of the Dead Space games beginning in 2008 with the very first entry in its series. Nowadays, this masterclass in survival horror design is nothing but a distant memory of a bygone generation. It has been nearly a decade since we saw any flickers of life in the series. However, with a recent spark of hope, I was compelled to fire up the Xbox Series X and churn through all 3 mainline Dead Space games to talk to you about the life, death, and possible rebirth of this once great series. Whether you're new and wondering what makes this series so special, or you're hyped on the reports of a remake, this is for you. Oh, and spoiler warning, of course. According to co-designer Ben Winnat, the inception of Dead Space began as System Shock 3, until Resident Evil 4 rolled around and was so good that they desired to build upon those mechanics instead. Rest in peace, System Shock. One thing that Glenn Schofield critiqued about Resident Evil 4 was its lack of immersion. This was mostly due to having to stop and shoot, but it carried into other aspects of its design that would serve to raise his own survival horror title to new heights. It begins with the HUD. Arguably its most standout feature, or really lack thereof, is doing away with the traditional health bars and other meters, as well as common menu management in exchange for it being displayed naturally through in-game objects. Isaac's health runs down the spine of his rig, and there's a stasis meter clearly displayed on the right shoulder. Anything handled in your inventory is projected directly from the rig as well. The map, the items, it's all happening in-game in real time. Ammo counters were holographically displayed atop the weapon. Cutscenes, they played through video logs attached to your rig, and there was never a fade to black or a loading screen unless you reached the tram at the end of the level. Your waypoint to objectives was shot out of your hand from, you guessed it, your rig. I mean, imagine how convenient that is. A waypoint to anything you're curious about.
Oh, here it is. I've been looking all over the place for this thing. I'm so glad I found it. Okay, cool, good.
Anyway, quite literally nothing can distract you, and that only strengthens other elements of the game because that's where all your attention is placed. Things like enemy patterns, weapons needed for particular scenarios, big scares, and most importantly, the setting. Visceral Games, the developers of the original Dead Space games, placed the first game within the USG Ishimura. Filling the rig of the silent Isaac Clarke, you board this ship on what is meant to be a mere repair mission. Simply done, right? We're not gonna go kill a bunch of monsters here. We're just going to fix things. But also, it's a hunt for your missing girlfriend, Nicole, who left Isaac a message in clear distress. Isaac Clarke, being an engineer, ironically makes him all the more badass because he lacks something such as a military background, thus making all the crazy shit he actually does more impressive. I wish I was an engineer, I really do. That's the simple setup really, and the game can carry its own weight through its strong gameplay, but it's the highly underappreciated lore that really gives Dead Space its legs for hardcore fans. It is vital to get the USG Ishimura operational, but it is tied to a new resource mining method, planet cracking. Planet cracking is it's exactly what it sounds like. You crack open the planet and mine its resources for all they're worth. It's twisted, I know. This is because humanity is seeking a replenishable energy source, and this becomes one of their main methods. So yeah, get the ship running, humanity lives on. Simple, right? Well, as you peel the layers back through various audio and text logs, a la Bioshock, you learn of the marker of sorts, and that was researched as a replenishable resource too. The catch? The original marker was discovered on Earth 300 years ago, and research led by Michael Altman, a eventual prophet of sorts, not really intentionally, propelled a cult known as the Church of Unitology to form around this marker. Unearthing a copy marker known as the Red Marker on Aegis 7, one of the planets to be cracked, revealed a genetic code was written on the marker itself. Eventually, the Red Marker was brought on board and things began to fall apart on the Ishimura. In a manner of speaking, Dead Space's best character is the very setting. Logs across the Ishimura paint a story of desperation, paranoia, mutiny, and growing power struggles amongst those on board, mostly thanks to the effects of the marker. People began killing each other, but the Necromorph contagion would reanimate those corpses, and they would appear hardly recognizable, boasting all those fun new limbs for slashing and tendrils for stabbing. With this as the backdrop to a ship of many corridors, I was captured by one oddly specific element. Visceral Games made these corridors interesting. The marker would cause a compelling narrative reason for Isaac to hear whispering aboard the ship.
Search and rescue.
It also made the visions he had of Nicole all the more impactful because you were suffering the same fate as those around you. The impressive tech, especially for its time of 2008, also helps lift the rather linear exploration in the game. Great sound design goes a long way in horror, like this part here where I thought it was a necromorph crawling around the vents and I was being stalked, but I was in for a much different surprise. Procedural generation also makes the lanes tense because one playthrough may have a necromorph flying out of a left panel and the next will be the vent above you. It's truly unpredictable, but it never felt cheap because they're not at the core of the real scares of the game. Meshing that with superb environmental storytelling, which depicts the gruesome fate of those trapped aboard the ship, and everything gives both the game's story and atmosphere momentum. Okay, so don't let my endless gushing about Dead Space's narrative be mistaken that this isn't a gameplay first experience. In fact, once again, the gameplay alone makes this series worth playing because even to this day, there isn't anything quite like it. Why is that? Well, I have two words for you. Strategic dismemberment. One thing that only a sick fucking gamer could say with a smile on their face and not be thrown into prison for it, okay? The melding of excellent necromorph design and dismemberment are about as good as co-op and Resident Evil. A beautiful match. That's right. Resident Evil 5 is the best one. Did you not know that? Yes, I said it. Look, while I have you taking me seriously here, let me break some of this down for you. As you roam the Ishimura, you'll be hounded by all sorts of necromorphs, and with your tools of destruction, you are more than well equipped to handle it. The iconic plasma cutter can chop off the pointy limbs of your foes. Better yet, you can use your telekinetic abilities to then repurpose those limbs as weapons to then save ammunition, plus the satisfaction of pinning a necromorph to the wall. I mean, that feels great, right? I mean, that's a little wrong to say, but you get what I'm saying. The line gun will cast a wide arc that can slice off limbs in the same manner. Interestingly, each of the weapons has an alternative fire mode, which can be used in a variety of situations. So the plasma cutter can rotate with its alt fire button, making you select different parts of the body and remove them with ease. The Ripper can fire out a telekinetic saw blade, okay, sure, why not, to shred your foes, or blast the blade out on its own and watch it bounce around and take out a ton of foes at once. The various necromorphs add flavor to your combat encounters. How many shots will this take me? Removing the orange sack of an exploder before it reaches you can be repurposed into a bomb used against other creatures attacking you. Combine that with the ability to upgrade each weapon, and the agency you have over a survival horror experience here is unmatched. Oh, and there's zero gravity, so you're truly in dead space. Check that out. Pretty crazy, right? It's not just the title anymore. But there's one final mechanic. 1 point of game design that is a triumph leagues above and beyond what any developer could hope to accomplish.
What's going on, everybody? It's Isaac Clarke here. Finally, after years of mental torture, I've figured out something to do with my life. So I've retired and started a cooking show. Welcome to Cooking with Isaac. Today, we're making mushed Necromorph. So the first thing you need to do is you gotta get the Necromorph meat right here. It's just that simple. Then, step 2, you gotta pound it. You gotta destroy it. Oh shit.
The stomp, man. The stomp. This is what is incredible about games. How could you even predict this is what would come of Isaac Clarke? My man, in my opinion, has the most iconic screech in video games, and his stomp would become a very important mechanic in sequels because of how loved it was. Hey, so why don't we get into that sequel? Dead Space 1 managed to eclipse 1 million sales after its launch despite not being a traditional EA published title, which showcased that the series had a high ceiling. With all the pillars established with the first game, the question was, how could developer Visceral Games carry things forward in a meaningful way with a sequel? Well, multiplayer, duh! This was where things got really weird during the PS3 and 360 era, where you could just slap a multiplayer into your game and boom, sometimes you get a Mass Effect 3, other times you get BioShock 2. People to this day still find matches in Dead Space 2 multiplayer, although it's quite difficult. You could play as either the Necromorphs or faceless characters within rigs as you battle waves of foes, moving from objective to objective. Honestly, it wasn't that bad, but that's not why we play Dead Space, and it's not what makes Dead Space 2, in my opinion, the best in the mainline trilogy. Of course, this multiplayer move was to make the game more marketable, more accessible, something that would really hurt the third entry even more so, but this was their happy medium, creating a horror game with a multiplayer component. Still, what they really did with the second Dead Space is take those major pillars we touched on and made them better or just unchanged. The immersive elements are much of the same because if it's not broken, don't fix it. The procedural encounters that were built off of in the first game here are really slimmed down for much more planned encounters and a diversified location that's much more open to explore. The dismemberment is better thanks to improved weapons, and as for the tech, well, it only gets better over time as we'd expect. Not only that, the team at Visceral took the story into deep waters with something much more character-driven, and in turn synthesized the mind-bendy, creepy nature of the original with an added cast of characters worth caring about. This becomes all the more impressive when you account for Dead Space's shorter runtime of about 10 to 12 hours per game. There really isn't much room to grow, but they make every moment count for what is one of the very best games of the 360 and PS3 generation. The first way they accomplish this is by giving Isaac a voice. Gunnar Wright's performance as Isaac is just phenomenal, alright? So instead of him just following the commands of different crewmates aboard the Ishimura, he's actually able to think and speak for himself, which makes some of his death-defying stunts he performs on behalf of others much more understandable. Now, it's your girlfriend Ellie who gets her eyes stabbed out for you and is forking out those commands. Nice, let's go, Ellie. Anyway, kidding aside, Ellie develops into a fine and capable character who eventually warms up to working together with Isaac to escape Titan Station. Still, all this humanizes the struggles he went through in the first game and how they still haunt him in the next entry. You see, Nicole, Isaac's old girlfriend, was actually dead the entirety of Dead Space 1. He was essentially chasing ghosts thanks to the effects of the marker. Those very effects of the marker are front and center as he is haunted by creepy visions of his dead girlfriend. Isaac Clarke is a madman, but it isn't really his fault. You can't help but feel bad for the hand he's been dealt, and it only gets worse. 3 years after the events of the first game, Isaac is now trapped aboard the Titan Station outside of Saturn, where he and others impacted by the marker are being studied in order to create more markers through reverse engineering. Of course, that went wrong because science never learned, clearly.
All right, this is it. I've made it. A red marker. This will be our limitless supply of energy. And hear me out. This marker here will not bring the dead back to life. It will only bring us endless life, as this is just nothing more than an energy source. Through science!
Titan Station allowed the level designers to spice things up in this sequel. There's much more color splashed everywhere. All the locations play differently from the last, involving new gameplay objectives. Despite all that, it manages to feel claustrophobic just like the USG Ishimura. It never opens up too wide, but it also never feels like a bunch of boxes clumped together. The first 6 chapters of Dead Space 2 are still to this day some of the creepiest shit of all time to me, and spotlight why the level design in this game is just superb. Waking up in an unfamiliar environment and immediately running for your life. Being yanked out of a vent by your imaginary girlfriend who wants to put a syringe in your eye. Being stalked in the Church of Unitology by new Necromorphs who hide from you, playing a game of hide and seek and charging you out of nowhere. Killing legit Necromorph babies in a nursery. This game is absolutely screwed up, and it's all the stronger for it. As you transition smoothly from chapter to chapter thanks to the tram from Dead Space 1 now being removed, you learn that the Unitologists have only grown and believe more than ever that we should embrace the markers and, in turn, the Necromorphs, as they will provide the cleansing. So now, the Unitologists have growing interest in Isaac as he's the key to more markers, and Tideman, the head honcho here at Titan Station, is researching the marker where he knows Isaac is capable of destroying it. That means he's trying to stop you at every turn. This is unfortunately one of the primary shortcomings with Dead Space 2 for some, as there really isn't any interesting villain at the heart of it. Much like the first game, none of that really does matter because Isaac's driving force and character developments make it a much more interesting story and are deservedly earning that spotlight. Oh, and they improved stomping. How could we argue with that? Now you can just squish Necromorphs and they drop loot. This game just makes me chef's kiss with its balance of action and intensity. It's always making you clench, but it's never quite overwhelming you to the point where it's just a third-person shooter. Right, so we pretty much friggin' nailed it at this point, says Visceral. So now what happens when you hit that ceiling? You come screeching down to the floor, and then you fall through the floor. Dead Space 3 had charm in my eyes until I went back and replayed it. Every single element the series had planted, watered, grown, and nurtured over the last 2 games is wholeheartedly betrayed in its third and final entry. It'd be a compliment to call Dead Space 3 the Resident Evil 6 of this franchise. I can't believe when researching for this, I saw Game Informer call it one of the best games of the generation, and Polygon forked it a 9.5 out of 10. Maybe I'm the odd one out, but this game is passable on gameplay and downright appalling on design and story. For starters, scientists, wait for it, didn't learn.
Hey, here we go. Just tweak it a little bit there, and a little bit. Damn it, Mark! Are you working on a marker right now? Oh, hey, no markers here. Why do you ask? I know when you're lying to me. We are being invaded again by Necromorphs. People are dying again. Why are you doing this? All right, look, I am making another marker, okay? I made another red marker, but I swear, if we can have limitless energy, who cares if we're getting killed by the undead? It doesn't matter anymore. We have limitless energy. That's what it's all about, right?
A marker is activated because why not keep trying to use them as an unlimited energy resource? Are we running out of ideas here? And the leader of the growing Unitology movement, Danik, wants to kill Isaac, so Isaac can't stop nature from taking course. AKA, yeah, the Necromorphs are going to murder absolutely everybody. Nature, it's great. So, you finally get a peek at humanity as you're contacted to go seek out Ellie, who has left you. Then, the action picks up, and it's at this very moment where this man leaps on top of the car, pulls out grenades, there's explosions and shooting everywhere, that I couldn't help but drop my head and shake it back and forth. The music roars. They give you cover shooting controls. What is this? Not only that, Isaac wipes out people selfishly that cross traffic, and at this point, I'm kicking my feet up. I'm just going, all right, let's see how wild this train wreck actually gets. Joining your side is John Carver, a dude who's pissed. He is just fucking pissed, all right? He told his son he can't become a soldier like his dad. He left his family. My man is pissed. That is it, top to bottom. Carver is a lot like Sheva in Resident Evil 5. They both exist purely as co-op partners. but at least they tried to do something with John. But man, this game feels like two different ideas stitched together. Yeah, Dead Space 3 is a co-op game, and I think it's difficult to argue it's actually a good one. To avoid tons of loading screens, Dead Space always loved its elevators, much like, hey, Mass Effect, one of our favorites. You just chill in there and the game is quietly loading in the background, you hear some music, maybe a little conversation, someone contacts you, whatever. To keep players in check while parts of the level loaded in Dead Space 3 come in the form of ungodly amounts of ladders and rotating doors. Check out this clip right here, okay? I'm gonna do a little play-by-play. I'm just roaming around with my co-op partner, Cheek Clapper 332, as we pass through 3 different rotating doors to nothing significant. It blows my mind that this game dropped in 2013 when you had Dead Space 1 in 2008 demanding far less obvious invisible loading screens. But here we are. So let's just go ahead and keep rolling what we have. Tech hangups aside, 75% of the story in Dead Space 3 forgets that John Carver exists, as he magically appears on the other side of death-defying jumps or is left out entirely of cutscenes. Not only that, but co-op cuts out 100% of the creep factor as you roam the same supply depots over and over and over and over. Even if you're doing it by yourself, it just isn't scary at all. The reused assets in this game really call into question how the budget for this game was applied. If that wasn't enough, the ammo clips are what made me sink in my chair. Dead Space 3 endlessly pounds you with equipment, the exact opposite of what this kind of game should do. I was constantly sifting through my inventory, dropping, you heard that right, items, and especially ammo. So instead of dropping maybe 2 crucial shots of your plasma cutter, they gave you 8 of an ammo clip that could be universally used across all weapons. The physics were dumbed down too, so the telekinesis feels worse. Hell, the limb targeting doesn't even matter in this entry. So ultimately, the gameplay drags and backstabs the most defining pillar of its gameplay next to its lack of HUD. Arguably the coolest part of this game though, okay, let's get a little positive here, are the co-op missions, where whoever's playing as John Carver sees something quite different from Isaac as John goes through his own mental battles as you're on Talvalantis. Admittedly, this helps separate the two on a mental plane, which is really something only Dead Space can accomplish after all of this world building. So, tip of the cap for Visceral on this one. I really liked it and I wish they could have done more with it. I said at the top that it felt like 2 games stitched together. That's because the first number of chapters have you roaming various ships, turning into what looks like a game pitch titled Dead Space 1 but with co-op. Ironically, things become almost a little too tight as it squeezes you down corridors with friends. On a positive note, when you're exploring the space sections, things are far more open and it gives you a glimpse of what a next-gen Dead Space could look like, and it's one of the few bright spots of the game. Then you're on Talvalantis, a snowy tundra of a planet where things are either far too open or far too repetitive. It's just a game that never quite hits its stride on a gameplay front, on a pacing front, any front, quite frankly. Fortunately, killing Necromorphs feels great, even if this is the entry they stopped introducing new ones and instead reskinned them with more health. It was really disappointing on that front too. Introducing the revamped upgrade bench. Tons and tons of combinations are packed into it, allowing you to create exploding bullets guns with rocket launchers for a secondary, or perhaps a rapid-fire plasma cutter with an even quicker javelin gun beneath it. Very neat, very much not Dead Space. But you know what the least Dead Space thing is, though? Microtransactions.
Hey kids, Mr. Bethesda here. Oh, I'm sorry, you probably couldn't have helped but notice my gi with a black belt beneath my wonderful suit. We're filling in for Mr. EA today. I just had to run to the dojo real quick after this because I'm gonna beat some ass. Speaking of beating the shit out of things, I want to kick the life out of your wallet right now. Introducing Dead Space 3 microtransactions. Yeah, you know Dead Space is a single player franchise. That's too bad. Guess what you're gonna do? Farm resources in this game. Something you've never done before. But now it's integral to our workbench, which we've upgraded. It's a standout feature, and albeit a little bit cool, but now we're gonna monetize it. So you want all of the resources you need to upgrade all of your weapons, you're gonna have to pay. But you could always get it for free through scavenger bots. But we've limited that as well. So if you want extra scavenger bots, you're gonna have to pay us for that too. It's all about the resource game, kid, and I'm draining yours.
All right, the story. Could this be the game's saving grace? I kind of spoiled it already, but it depends on who you ask. For me, I saw desperation. Remember how I said the markers are controlling the Necromorphs and the Necromorphs are spreading via contagion? In an attempt to provide a massive plot twist, they tell you the aliens actually found the markers first, and the Brethren moods are the source of all this. This is an attempt to explain the ominous messages like "make us whole, Isaac," and "turn it off" that you see across Dead Space 2 and 3. The whole goal of the third game is to end the threat once and for all, which seems to be a success at the cost of Isaac and John's lives at the end. Suddenly, the Awakened DLC arrives. They're alive, and guess what? No one else is. Returning to Earth, Isaac and John see a Brethren moon attach itself to Earth, and then these orange flashes appear, which led to speculation that it may have been a hallucination caused by some markers since they replicate those in Dead Space 2. I don't want to be rude, but sometimes it's not that deep. Sometimes a bad job is just done, and I believe this is one of those instances. Not only that, the characters are just way worse. Ellie has been degraded to just a mere love interest. Robert Norton is so obviously a double-crossing douchebag from the first moment you lay eyes on him, and he fulfills each of those expectations. This is where the writing flat out fails the game beyond its lore. So Robert betrays you, right? This is something you already saw coming because he thinks the mission's a failure and that we should leave this frozen planet. Okay, sure, why not, right? Isaac and him battle it out, and it turns out that Robert is involved with the game's main antagonist, Danik. So Isaac ends up killing Robert, who happened to be dating Ellie at the time because she moves on really fast. Isaac goes and explains it and just leaves out the whole, "Hey babe, he tried to kill me," or "Hey Ellie, you gotta understand, he was betraying all of us here, he was working with Danik." None of that. John doesn't back you up, and Isaac merely says, "Ellie, I had no choice." So the plot has room for Ellie to get pissed at him and create false distress when her life is threatened. Look, I appreciate that the team tried to make a more accessible horror experience in the market of $60 games where people play it for a weekend and then peace out, so it's just let's play fodder. I get it. But the action is way too much. The story is far too just bad and predictable, and I get it. But this game needed 5 million sales to continue on. It didn't reach it, and quite frankly, I understand why. That brings us to today. Dead Space died in 2013, but much like a Necromorph, it appears it was never truly dead. Visceral Games desired to make another Dead Space game building on the existing mechanics of the first half of Dead Space 3. The team envisioned an apocalyptic scenario where you'd float from ship to ship, scavenging materials in an attempt to survive. Given that things are screwed, they viewed it as an opportunity to have a clean break from the likes of Isaac, John, and Ellie if the DLC was not evident enough that they were screwed. Visceral was instead moved on to the likes of Battlefield Hardline and then a new Star Wars game before being shut down. I'll say it, I think EA is the scapegoat of a lot of studios that mismanage themselves, but this one, 100% on them. This was during an era where they were deeply involved on the development of titles, even more so than they are now, and shoved microtransactions into any title entering the market. Since then, they have been delegated to their sports games, where any poor sucker picking them up will likely end up buying the game 3 times. Noting the success of Resident Evil, EA is now assigning EA Motive to work on a remake of the first Dead Space game, which was revealed at EA Play 2021. EA Motive handled the campaign of DICE's Star Wars Battlefront 2 and Star Wars Squadron. While fun video games, both came up extremely short in their writing. My advice, keep an eye on the remake, go play the originals. They still hold up perfectly fine, and if they drop the ball on this remake, then I may have to remake this video for another death.